Hello, everybody. We're back with another video, and remember I was telling you guys about the my archival experience in the previous video, and I said I was going to do maybe a series based on my archival research on the island of Dominica and slavery in that island. So in this video, I'm going to go through some of what I discovered in the archives while doing my research. Now, this section right here. Now, one of the things that I talked about in the previous video was the importance of reading cursive and how, in order to really get the true information of the past and not just regurgitate what some other historian has interpreted, is by being able to go into the archives and read the information from the 18th century or 17th century or whatever historic time period that you're discovering or discussing. And you can't do this these days if you don't really have the ability to read cursive, because this is what they're not teaching in school. So that's one of the things that the last video was about. This video is going to talk more so about like what I actually found in the archives by having this ability to read cursive, and also just being able to go through and put all of the information in context, because not everything was written in cursive back then. There was some print stuff that they typed up, but for the most part, a lot of the correspondences between governors, secretary of state, planters, and just government officials in general was written by hand, and they wrote in cursive in those days. So this is what we're going to be going over today, and I'm going to kind of show you guys in Dominica's archives a little bit of the reason why I became more so maroon-minded. Now, for those of you that don't know, Dominica is a tiny little island in the Lesser Antilles. It experienced the transatlantic slave trade just like the other Caribbean islands. There was tens of thousands of Africans imported into that island colony. It was controlled by the French until 1763, and then after 1763 it became a British colony. There was a dispute during the American Revolutionary War for the island between the French and the British from 1778 to 1783, and then the island has been officially British ever since, but all the way until 1978, November 3rd, 1978. But generally speaking, the Africans had a lot of control over the interior of the island, when what they called in these documents runaway slaves, and then they later started to call maroons. A maroon is a renegade runaway slave that doesn't obey the law, right? They say, I don't care what your law is. I don't care what you consider to be a legitimate state. I'm going to go over here and create my own legitimate community independent of your draconian state structure of a society in which you enslave my people and people who look like me. The people of Dominica, there was a large maroon community of Africans that ran away. They were imported into the colony to work on sugar plantations, and many of them escaped up into the mountains and created their own independent villages. They grew their own food. They hunted their own food. They raided plantations for weapons, and they made links and they made connections with African people on the plantations. And so there was this dynamic of communication, clandestine operations going on between Africans in the woods who were living freely, and then those on plantations who were in name slaves, but I consider them maroons as well, because they also contributed to the freedom of those that were in the island. They contributed to the liberation movements of all those in the island as well. All right, so let's take a look here at this is some of the information that I've transcribed over the years. Now, for those of you that don't know, let's just go back and kind of take a look at what the documents generally looked like at this time, right? So here's an example of information that's being transcribed, right? This is how you have to get it from the documents. You got to read it. Sometimes it's kind of hard to read. Some of it is more clear than others, right? So what I did was, when I was in the archives, I took this information, I took pictures of it, thousands and thousands of pictures, like 39, I think it was about 39,000 photos that I took while I was in the archives. Because you can't take this stuff home. You can't check out the book in the Colonial Archives. Can't take it home. So I, take pictures of it, and then you bring it back, and then when you come home to the comfort of your own home, then you can transcribe this information from your tablet or from your cell phone. And this is what I ended up transcribing here. And when I try to transcribe the information, I try to keep it exactly what it looked like in the book, right? So there's no confusion or anything like that. So this one was, and every now and then I write my own little notes on the side and everything like that. But this is from CO 71-9, right? That's the book that it came from. CO means Colonial Office Papers, and then 71-9 is some arbitrary number that they come up with. And usually I would embolden certain important things, like maybe dates or names or things that I'm looking for. But let's just kind of go down and see if we can find anything fun and worth looking at. All right, so there's a bunch of stuff about. It's just a lot of correspondences between the governor, who was Governor John Ord, and this is in the 1780s. And the reason why I'm starting here is because this is what they consider to be the first Maroon War in Dominica. Even though one can argue that they'd always really been at war with the Maroons. So let's see. All right, so this letter here is a House of Assembly meeting. It looks like, a meeting of His Majesty's Council. And sometimes when I was transcribing the information, I couldn't read every single word. Sometimes there's certain parts that are missing. Sometimes there are certain parts that go into the crease of the page, and you literally can't get the exact word that they're trying to say. And so there's some blanks here. There's some misspelled words here, and because oftentimes they also misspelled words back then when they were writing. But so I just tried to transcribe the information exactly how it appeared to me. This one, this is on the following page. I also divided it by pages. This was page 263 in the book, and it says, and this is all in cursive handwriting, right? And it says to the council to His Excellency the Chief, or the Commander-in-Chief. This board, on receipt of Your Excellency message of yesterday, sent it down for the immediate perusal of the Assembly, as a bill was then under their consideration, calculated for the further suppression of the runaway slaves. So they're talking about suppressing the runaway slaves. At this point, they'd become a nuisance to the planters. And introduced by a joint committee of this board and the House appointed for the express purpose of endeavoring by further measure to put the colony in a state of tranquility. Right? Now, the part here I embolden is a part that I probably ended up using for my dissertation at the time. The intelligence communicated to us by the enclosed accompanying Your Excellency's message evinces the necessity of every possible exertion being made for the security of the colony. We are sorry to learn that Your Excellency has reason to believe that the slave belonging to the estate upon which the outrage was committed were in correspondence with the runaways, and that the same evil disposition is prevalent with the slave of other plantations, and would be found so should a similar opportunity call it. In proof is the heavy penalties of the laws against criminals of this description. So in other words, it says here that slaves belonging to the said estate that they're talking about was in correspondence with those runaways. So what are these runaways doing, and what are they talking about? What kind of correspondence are they having? If you go down further, they even start talking about here. I notice at the end of this message, it says, with respect to the Negroes in subjection, we find that former legislation have passed laws for their satisfaction, and comforts, such as we think it executed would secure the objects they had in view with an intent of receiving the, and I put, it's looked to me like IDIA, and so I put a question mark because I didn't know what that was or what that meant. An extent of those laws extracts were lately published from them by an order of the Court of Sessions, and we assure your excellency that we shall be always happy to contribute to the execution of those laws as far as lies in your power, and it give our concurrence to such other laws as may be thought necessary to ensure to slaves good and humane treatment. So they're recognizing a pattern here. Ill treatment of enslaved people, they rise up in revolt and start killing white folk, their masters. So they're trying to find ways to mitigate this problem. All right. Now, I'm going to show you guys a little bit later that there's documentation where they even get more so, they make it official about, trying to put together some type of amelioration act and some policies for the better treatment or humane treatment of enslaved people. Now let's go over here. This is a pretty good one that kind of captures what's really going on. All right, so this is at a meeting of His Majesty's Privy Council chamber in the town of Roseau on Monday, 18th day of July, 1785. It is written, His Excellency acquainted the board that he had been informed that last Saturday a party of runaways consisting of about 40, armed with 12 muskets and some cutlasses, had made 2 different attacks upon a plantation at St. Joseph's called Casada Garden, and robbed it of some guns, a keg of powder, and some other articles, that they had the audacity to go as far as to wound the manager in the left shoulder, and asked their opinion whether it would not be necessary to send out a party in pursuit of such runaways. All right, so they wounded the manager. They attacked this place, 40 runaways going down there, and with their muskets, and then they seized some gunpowder. Now, looks like they're getting ready for war, right? This is not just, we're going to this plantation taking things because we're hungry, but they're taking gunpowder, one, maybe to stop those people from possibly attacking those Maroons in the woods, and 2, to get the gunpowder for themselves to maybe go on the offensive. Go down here a little bit further. Let's see. They're talking about they ordered a party of troops of color under the command of Monsieur something, I couldn't read the name, and they're using people of color to attack those Maroons in the woods. That's what they continue to talk about here. But one of the main things I want to emphasize is the valiant behavior, the action of the agency of the Africans to go and commit these so-called depredations, these attacks on these concentration camps known as plantations. Here's a pretty good one. All right, so this is from the Government House, Dominica, December 15th, 1785. And this is to the Secretary of State. This message is from, I believe it's from Governor John Ord. And he starts off talking about, a previous letter that he wrote and all this stuff. And now he says, in my last, I had the honor to acquaint your lordship that the legislation had at length passed a bill for the suppression of the runaways, which promised some success. Then he goes on to describe an actual incident that took place, one of the battles between the Maroons and the plantations. It was about 7 o'clock of the night of the blank instant. They came down from the woods to the amount of near 100, completely armed, to an estate called Rosalie, belonging in part to Lieutenant Governor Stewart, and demanding a runaway, who had then been taken a few days before, which Negroes was immediately sent to me, proceeded to for upon and destroy every foreseen who opposed them, and to burn all the buildings. 4 white men, I am grieved to say, fell after being covered with wounds. Those, before dead, they plunged into the fire. The principal black they treated in the same way, and wounded all his family, which consisted of a wife and many children, females as well as males. All of the buildings and outhouses they razed to the ground. About 7 o'clock the next morning, they retired to their blank, carrying off with them considerable booty. The parties intended to serve in the woods according to the list. So, what you see here is a very unafraid group of warriors fighting not only for their independence in the woods, because that was pretty much secured in the woods. They lived freely for so long, and pretty much almost unbothered to a certain extent. But as Martin Luther King once said, an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And as long as these Maroons were living in the woods, and then on the fringes of their communities in the woods, there's plantation slavery going on, of the enslavement of African people and the brutalization of these people. I think the Maroons understood that they could not live free themselves, and this is what compelled them to engage in these attacks on these plantations. Governor Ord goes on to say that, Your Lordship, when you consider our situation, local circumstances, and particular events, will not wonder at the Negroes being so much formidable here than any other in any other West India island except for Jamaica. And for those of you guys that know anything about Jamaica, Jamaica was, had large Maroon communities of thousands of people that engaged in bloody battles with the British colonial government way back in the extending from the 1670s all the way to the 1730s, until they end up signing a treaty with that government there. But Governor Ord goes on to state that, so situated with respect to the French islands, that it is a great asylum for their deserting Negroes, at once increasing our numbers and rendering it in some measure impossible to ascertain them. During the time the French possessed the island, they were in some degree armed and disciplined by them. Even now I have reason to fear they furnish them with various supplies. Their number at present we suppose to be about 300, but it is only a supposition. Soon, however, I hope, though I foresee 1,000 difficulties, that they may be reduced. All right, so there's hundreds of Africans in the woods that are engaging in these activities. Next video, I want to share with you some of the response, and there's so much more to this as well, right? I mean, there's pages and pages of what you're seeing here. But next video, I want to show to you guys the response that the colonial government has to the African presence and to the African attacks on the plantations. And it's this way of, okay, we got to find another way about controlling these people in a more subtle and insidious way. We need to find ways to control these African people to make sure they do not revolt. All right. And I'm going to make a little bit of comparisons into the way governments treat citizens or people today, and allude to the reason why I have more of a Maroon mentality when it comes to fighting for justice and freedom and things like that, and not just going along with, token policies, if you will. Anyways, that's it, guys. The revolution will not be pesticides. Peace.